Many of us would like to homeschool our children, but sometimes we're on the fence about whether or not we should, or we don't necessarily know what are all the possible benefits. So today we're going to talk on AbiHomeschoolsToo about what are the top 10 reasons why you should homeschool your children. So again, many of us may be on the fence about whether to homeschool our children or not, or maybe we're trying to convince our spouse or our extended relatives that might be critical of the idea in the first place. So number one, the first reason why anybody should want to homeschool their children is because of their responsibility in front of God. The reality is that our children are gifts from God, and our gratitude is going to be shown in the way in which we raise them, not by the amount of Facebook pictures that we put up online of what our kids are doing or how they're dressed, but the spiritual and educational development that we provide for them. And this is something that's serious that we really don't want to be put in anybody's hands. And the reality is that if we look at any of the public school systems, regardless of what part of the country or what country you're even in, a lot of them are just failing, period. They're not meeting standards that I would be happy with, not for myself, never mind my children. So it's important that we take this matter into our own hands. And we can't entrust people who don't love our children the way that we do to have their best interests at heart when we drop them off at the bus stop to be brought to these public schools to be taught God knows what, or to be just given packets or whatever else they might be given just to fill up a whole lot of hours of the day as babysitting centers or to provide people with jobs. Reason number two is to build a strong relationship with your children. Oftentimes today we see that many of the parents, they don't even know their kids. They drop them off for 8-9 hours a day if they're in extracurricular activities or sports. The amount of time that they actually spend with their children is next to none. And one of the best ways that you can bond with your children is through teaching them. Now, a lot of people are going to think like homeschooling, okay, how am I going to bond with my kid through grammar? Number one, you can bond with your kid through grammar just as much as you can through writing, just as you can with sports. But when you're homeschooling, there's going to be so many different subjects that you could do. I go rock climbing with my son. That's my physical activity that we do with my two sons. So now that's a bonding experience. We go bike riding. I could teach them about history. I read to them. There's so many different subjects that you could be bonding with your children with on a daily basis that definitely is not going to happen when you give that job or responsibility to somebody else, i.e. the public school system or private school system for that matter. So as a homeschooling parent, it allows you to not only be the educator, but you can also be a role model, and you can have a much larger impact in your child's life, because as you're going through all of these experiences, there's going to be so much room for you to have meaningful discussions about all of these new subjects and ideas that your child is being exposed to. So number three is going to be for the educational results. If you look at any institutionalized educational system, 9 times out of 10, they're only focused on tests, passing the exams. And if you really care about those things, check out the numbers. Homeschoolers are always on average performing much better than those children that are in public or even private schools. So take the standardized test out of the picture for a minute and think about, if I have an 8-year-old son that is above a 10th grade reading level, no institution is going to bring him up to that level. There's no place on earth where they're going to educate him on a way that's going to put him on a path to succeed like that. This brings us to reason number 4, which is that human beings are not cookie cutter factory products. You're going to have some children, just like my children, that excel in certain subjects and less in other subjects. So my first son, he might have an above 10th grade reading level, but his math might be somewhere around the 4th grade. Now, what is a public school or a private school even going to do with that? They're going to have him in different grades for different subjects. There's no way that they're going to accommodate a child in their different needs or their different strengths or weaknesses in this point. So homeschooling allows you to be flexible not only with the level and speed at which somebody is going to learn, but it also allows you to be flexible in so many different avenues. Some people learn better earlier in the morning. Some of them learn better in the evening. Some of them learn better with hands-on as opposed to some who learn with reading. When you put your child into an institution, again, you basically are following their format. And if your child doesn't fit that format, well, we might say that he has ADHD, we might put him on pills, we might do whatever else it may be that the institution is going to say to show that the child is wrong. The child doesn't fit, when the reality is that the system doesn't fit the child. Lastly, with regards to flexibility, is that If your child excels in a specific subject, homeschooling allows you now the opportunity to let your child excel specifically in that subject. Say, for example, that you have an artist. Well, at school, he might only get 45 minutes to do his art project, but if he excels in that subject and at home you want to give him 2, 3, 4 hours to do that, then you have the liberty to do so. So if you have a child that can read a novel in a day, in the public school, they're not going to allow him to do that because you have to move from class to class, subject to subject, and you only have a certain allotted time to get each subject done. Reason number 5 is the flexibility in the curriculum. So when you go to a public or a private school, the curriculum for the most part is set. Now, somebody might argue, but you have electives. Yeah, you're going to have electives, but even the electives that you have open to are going to be very limited, especially now when you have funding crises in all of these different schools. This is going to really limit you. Now, when you're homeschooling, the options are so broad and open, you can really do anything. If you want to make chess a class, then chess can be a class. If you want to trade gym class for karate lessons, or for example, what we do, we go rock climbing, this is something that you can do. You're not going to find that in a public school. You're not going to find that in a private school. Now, there are so many different subjects that you can do different things for. So field trips, field trips in schools are going to happen every so often, but you can do a field trip every week when you're homeschooling. You can go to the aquarium, you can go to the zoo, you can go to all of the different museums in the local city or the city that's closest to you. There's so much flexibility that you have. Even in the subjects, for example, the school is going to tell you what books you need to read. And while that book list that you might have or that summer reading that you might have might be good, you could really expand upon that. Maybe your children is more into science fiction, and that's something that they're going to read and it's going to push their reading level. Well, in the school, you might get one of those books every once in a while, but they're going to force the child to read what they think is best. For example, we would like to have our children read the classics, and so that's something that maybe isn't focused on inside of the school system. They might get 1 or 2 classics, but we want our child to go a lot more in depth. We have the ability to do that because the flexibility of the curriculum is really up to what we want to do with it. Also, the resources that are out there for you to be very flexible, you have so many tutorials on YouTube. If you want to have a cooking class, if you want to have a carpentry class, if you have a prodigy on your hands, like really, really intelligent child, there are so many additional resources from colleges and universities that are online for free. You can check iTunes University, you can check all of their different YouTube sites, go to the websites of the universities, and you're going to find that there's so many different classes on subjects that you couldn't even possibly imagine. You could get an amazing education right in your own home. Even if you're saying to yourself like, well, if I homeschool, I don't have the time to be picking up all these different curriculums, or I don't have the know-how to know what books are the right books. There are even homeschool curriculums from A to Z that you can just basically follow. The main point here is that you're going to be able to do whatever it is that's right for you and for your child, whether it's a curriculum that you make up or something that is already standard that you're going to follow, or a mix and match in between. So reason number 6 is the flexibility that homeschooling affords you with regards to time. And so for some people, putting your children in the public or private schools for 7, 8, 9 hours a day is a great idea because it's a babysitting center where you can go off and do your career, or go and do your shopping, or hang around the house, or do whatever it is that you want. But inside of the institutional educational systems, a lot of times there's tons of busy work that really is not necessary. So while the children are spending hours and hours inside of the school, then they're sent home with hours and hours of homework. When you're homeschooling, you could get lessons that would normally take you 45 minutes inside of a classroom, because you have 25 or 35 students, done in 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the speed or the brightness of your child. So instead of sending your children off to be with strangers for an extended period of time, you could really have them at home building bonds with you and with their other siblings. On top of that, you have the idea that maybe you want your schooling to be longer. Maybe instead of, again, 45 minutes for a science session, you want an hour and a half, or you want 2 hours or 3 hours. You have the ability to do that when you're homeschooling, because there is no bell that says, up, time's up, close the books, you got to go to the next class, or you got to go to the next subject. When you're homeschooling, you have the flexibility to make the class lesson or the subject last as long or as short as you would like it to be. With regards to flexibility of time, you can really work around your schedule. So for example, I have Mondays and Tuesdays off, but if my children are in school, then we're never going to have a weekend together. But because they homeschool, I can adjust their schedule so that their weekend is also Monday and Tuesday. What this means is now that we can have a weekend together, we can go out, we can do things, we can take trips together. Also, different things come up in life. You might have to move. There might be a sickness. You might want to take vacation on a time that doesn't agree with the regular school calendar. So again, it's going to give you the ability to adjust your schooling schedule to your needs that are specific to you and your family. So reason number 7 is that the environment is clearly better. No one should argue that public or private schools are going to be better environment than the actual home. There's so many social ills that the children are exposed to inside of these school systems, whether it's bullying, whether it's foul language, whether it's physical or sexual abuse coming from either other students or possibly even the security that's on the campus, sexual abuse coming again from other students or possibly even the teachers. The children are exposed to drugs, alcohol, so many different image issues, trying to keep up with the latest fashion. All of these different things that are basically distracting the child from the purpose that they're actually there, which is to get an education. Also, when you're trying to promote good moral character and beliefs, there's so many things that the institution itself is trying to break down. And so one of the complaints that people have about homeschooling is that, homeschooled children are going to be social misfits, and this is a misnomer. First and foremost, each and every single one of us that went through the public school systems knows people that, for whatever reasons, themselves were social misfits. They were shy, they were considered dorks, or whatever they were called, but just because you went to public school didn't mean that you were the life of the party. And on top of that, you look at homeschool children and you find that they're oftentimes complimented by adults because they're very talkative, they're very social, because they've been around adults most of the time, not other peers that are dragging them down with regards to their social abilities. So when your children are homeschooled, they're not going to be in a vacuum or they're locked in a closet. If you're homeschooling them properly, they're going to be interacting with a lot of the real world. And so they're going to be developing their character and their social skills in practical environments instead of in school, where what do we tell the people when they're in school? Wait until you get into the real world. So number 8 is your own personal development. And this is something that all homeschoolers will agree with, that when you're homeschooling your children, you yourself are personally going to benefit so much from this experience. Because as they say, the best way to learn something is to teach it. And so while you're trying to teach your children all of these different subjects, some of it might be review, where you're going over all of this stuff that you forgot from elementary school, intermediate school, and high school. And then sometimes you're going to be challenged where you're like, I don't know this stuff. Let me look it up. Let me help figure out a way to teach my child. And so you might end up watching videos or tutorials to help you understand and help explain to your children. And this is going to be a huge developmental process for you. Also, remember we said that you can be very flexible with the curriculum. So there might be things that you've always wanted to learn. Turn it into a subject that you homeschool your children with, and it's an opportunity for you to now learn that while you're learning with your child. On top of that, kids are full of questions, so they're going to always keep you on guard. And it's not like in the school where you would ask a question and the teacher clearly didn't know and they said, oh, well, we'll get to that next week or next class. Now you got your kid in front of you and you love your child, you want to give them the answer, and they're going to keep bugging you, so you're going to go back and you're going to look this stuff up and you're going to find out whatever it is that you can to give them the answer to the question. And this is really what the whole process of knowledge is all about, that curiosity of, why does this happen, or how does that work? Reason number 9 is that we want to protect the spiritual development of our child. And a lot of people, they're going to homeschool because they don't want their children exposed to evolution, or they don't want their child being taught Adam and Steve. They want to be taught Adam and Eve. Now, while these are valid points for myself, I want my child to study all of these different things and know that these ideas exist out there. So it's not necessarily about that, but also, inside of the public school system, you have to understand that they're not going to also give your side of the story or your opinion with regards to your religious beliefs. We would like to study science, but while we're studying science, we want to always bring that back to marveling over the creation and then using that to marvel over the greatness of the Creator. And in the school system, that's definitely not going to be something that is going to be allowed for the teacher to push forward. On top of that, we might want to stop every once in a while to pray And that's something that's not going to be allowed. So it's not that we don't want to be exposed to the subjects that are in the public school system, it's that we want to be able to study the subjects that we want to study while bringing into it our perspective. And so from our perspective, we believe that religion plays a major role in our lives, and it touches every aspect of our life and every science that we study, whether it's science itself, whether it's mathematics, whether it's reading, whether it's writing, whatever it is, we can always relate it back to the Creator and the morals of our religion and how we should practice those morals through each of these sciences. On top of that, if your child is in the public school system all day, when they come home, they're exhausted, and again, a lot of times they're going to have their own homework that they're going to have to do for additional hours if they're involved in extracurricular sports or activities. They're not going to have time to now come back and study the aspects of the religion that you might want to teach them. And so when we're homeschooling, those religious subjects can be an integral part of the homeschooling curriculum, whereas in the public or private schools, oftentimes, that's not going to happen. Now, somebody might come back and say, well, what about the private schools? You know, the private schools are going to be able to teach religion. Honestly speaking, oftentimes the private religious schools have a religious subject, and it's nothing more than a brush over of the topics that really should be given a whole lot more time and depth to be talked about and understood. Reason number 10 is that when you're homeschooling, the teachers are going to be way better. You have to have confidence in yourself. Now, some people are going to come back and say all this nonsense about how, oh, well, you're homeschooling, you're not qualified, you don't have any credentials. That's all nonsense. Most of the time, the people that are qualified teachers with their certifications, a lot of them aren't teaching the subjects that they themselves studied in university. They have to go and research the stuff so that they can teach it to the children. And that's if they care. If they don't care, they'll just show up and just give them packets or whatever they have to get the kids through the day and get their paycheck. On top of that, if you can read, write, do simple arithmetic, you should be able to get your child from a preschool level all the way through a high school education. And if there's things that you don't know, go and look them up. On top of that, even, there's so many resources that we have at our fingertips today through YouTube, through iTunes University, through Khan Academy. There's so many different things. You can use lynda.com. There's so many different resources that you can use to take your child, not just from a high school level, but even a college level to a professional level, to teach them actual skills that they can use when they go out into the workforce, as opposed to a lot of times in the high schools, they're being taught all sorts of stuff that isn't going to actually really have an impact on them in their future life or career. So like, for example, with iTunes University, you can get courses from prestigious Ivy League colleges, Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, MIT, Yale. All of these universities have free classes online. You can get the best education in the world in the comfort of your own home. And so long as you're there to coach and assist your child, you can really help them to excel far greater than anybody inside of the public school system is ever going to do. Again, think of the other aspect of that, the student-to-teacher ratio. In some of these classrooms, you might have 25 to 30 some odd kids in a class. Well, if your child is having problems and they keep having problems, that teacher is only going to give them so much effort till they let them fall behind. And a lot of times, it's not just that child, it's the whole class is falling behind because the teacher's not able to really give all of them the attention that they need in order to excel. When you're homeschooling, you're not going to let your kid fall behind. You're going to do whatever it is to help them succeed, and you're going to give them the one-on-one attention that they need. Even if you have multiple children at home in your house, you're going to have to just set up your schedule so that you give each child the time that they need throughout the day. And at some point in time, you're going to reach the ultimate goal, which is that your child is going to exceed your capabilities, and they're going to be able to start self-learning. They're going to be able to read and push themselves in the subject that they so desire, and it's going to really allow them to excel to a point which is going to go far beyond whatever they're going to get in any sort of public or private school. So on the flip side, you might have a child that doesn't excel in those common core subjects that the public or private school system is pushing in order to keep up with those standardized tests. But you might have a child that's a prodigy in another area, even though they might be failing to excel or even meet the standards in those other subjects. They might excel in something that's artistic. They might be, very good at carpentry, or they might be good with tearing apart radios and putting things back together, whatever it may be. They might be good at photography or something else. There's plenty of jobs that people can get making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars even, if they excel in those subjects. And so again, when you're looking at it from the public versus homeschooling aspect, you as the mother or father of that child who is now their teacher in the homeschooling environment, you can help them to excel in all of those things. So although these are 10 really good reasons why somebody might want to homeschool their children, this is definitely not an extensive list of all of the reasons why you might want to homeschool your child, because again, this is a very personal decision which is going to allow you to accommodate your individual situation, needs, and wants. But from my perspective, I'm not somebody that just says, well, to each his own. I truly firmly believe that homeschooling is the #1 best option that any of us can take if we're able to do so in terms of educating our children. It is going to be the best educational experience, and you're going to far exceed those who are put into these public or private school systems. Thanks for stopping by and checking out our YouTube channel. We're going to be here every week trying to upload new videos with advice for homeschoolers, as well as some educational series and some Q&A to answer some of the questions that you have. If you have any comments, please leave them in the section below. If this is your first time, we'd love to have you subscribe. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we'll see you next week.